What's your location over?
Yeah, we're overhead at the moment.
Just coming over the bridge.
Violent and threatening burglary gangs are travelling at high speeds across the country.
And he is at stop.
Coming face to face with homeowners in Gardaí, they are reckless and dangerous.
They told me to get back or they would kill me.
They creep into homes under cover of darkness.
I'm a prisoner in my own house.
The burglary business seems to be booming.
They stop in the local garage and get a breakfast roll and they go out robbing for the day.
This is the sleepy village of Newtown Gore in County Leitrim. 3 weeks ago, its only publican and his home were targeted by burglars. As Jerry Gorby served customers, just metres away, CCTV images show burglars stalking his home. One of them is armed with a nail bar. Within seconds, they are in. Minutes later, Jerry interrupted the gang.
On the night in question, Fran, I was heading over to the house as normal. As you can see, it's not very far.
No.
Headed to the door, and as I got to the door, I knew there was something wrong.
It was locked?
It was locked, yeah. So I headed towards the window, took a look in the window, and I could see somebody at the back of the room. At that stage, I knew there was something wrong, so I headed towards the side of the house to head out the front.
You ran out, I think?
Ran out the front. And as I got to the front, I could see them running across the street.
Were words exchanged?
Yes. They told me to get back or they would kill me.
Jerry rushed back into the packed bar to get help. The getaway car crashed just a mile away.
A good gang of lads got out. Even the local gun club got out with lights and tried to pursue them through the fields with good lights for about 4 hours in all. They were been looking in all the fields round areas to try and get them.
Were some of those people armed?
They would have been, Fran, yeah.
And if everybody turned to that...
Well, we don't know what would have happened if we had to come across them. That's the frightening thing.
The gang that robbed Jerry Gorby were travelling in a car stolen in Wicklow. It had been fitted with Cavan registration plates so it would blend in the locality. Garda sources have confirmed to Primetime that the car is linked to several other house robberies that day. This is typical of how these gangs operate. They are organised and cover vast areas of the country.
The Gardaí are trying to tackle these criminals, these 8 particular gangs. Most of them are based in South Dublin, predominantly in Tala. Also in Rathfarnham, there's another serious outfit around Dublin Airport and also in Ballyfermot.
Mr O'Donoghue died of a fatal heart attack, which a post-mortem found may have been associated with him disturbing the intruders.
Details of these gangs' activities are outlined in courts and reported to Gardaí on an almost daily basis.
In the early hours of Saturday morning, 54-year-old Richie McKelvey, who lives alone, was the latest victim. Taking what's described as a small amount of money, the gang fled the scene after the second robbery in 6 weeks at the house.
No one has been charged with the attack on Richie McKelvey, but even when people are convicted, sentences can be low. Weeks ago, a man convicted of an aggravated burglary on a 75-year-old received just 3.5 years.
OK, folks, thanks. Sergeant Mark O'Connell is going to brief you with the details of the operation that we're putting in place tonight.
Even though most of the gangs are Dublin-based, they are highly mobile. In the Midlands, a special task force has been set up to target these burglary gangs. Tonight in Portlaoise, the task force is mounting an operation to monitor one particular gang.
Where we're going tonight, you'll be aware of 2 burglaries in our district over the past week or so, where the burglars have gone down through the roof, disabled alarms and done certain things, a particular type of MO, which may be attributable to a Romanian gang who were previously in the country.
The officers are given the names and identities of suspects, details of the cars they may be using, and maps highlighting the areas in which they have been operating. Minutes later, we're on the road, heading for the first checkpoint on what will be a long night.
Yeah, we're heading to Abbeyleix, and we're going to take some of the back roads down towards Ballacalla and on towards junction near Rathdowney, just off the M8. It's the Balacalla Services, and with the intention of setting up a checkpoint on the southbound ramp and on the northbound ramp just to cover both access to the motorway.
Roger, we're just coming into Abbeyleix now, so we'll be with you in about 15 minutes. If you can relay the same to Oscar 1 and 2 there.
Roger, Oscar 2 are on the way and Oscar 3 are at location.
And these groups tend not to use the main routes as such other than the motorway networks when they come off it and pass through the rural roads. So the older national routes and different things tend to be traversed rather than used directly by the gangs. So if we have 3 or 4 cars out tonight looking for one car, we're covering across hundreds of kilometres
just to catch one person?
Just to catch one car.
In County Wicklow, Bernice Lang is living with the aftermath of being robbed. While she sat with her husband watching television, burglars climbed through a bedroom window.
Next minute I knew that we was broken into and they robbed all my jewellery and everything like that, and his fish rods and everything.
When you say all your jewellery was gone?
My jewellery, what my mother-in-law gave me, my granddaughter, my grandson and my daughter and son, and my mum's jewellery, what she left me. And my engagement ring and everything.
It had a terrible effect on Bernice's husband Ken, who was already living with health issues.
My husband was really jolly and really outgoing. He hates staying in the house. But when we got broken into, he went into himself and he was very, very old looking and things like that. He's just worried. I mean, when I used to get up for work in the morning, I used to have to lock the door until I came back from work and open it. And he wouldn't even be out of the bed. And my husband died 3 months after our break-in. And he had never got over it. He went down the hill since after the break-in. And I blamed them who broke into my house.
The Director of Public Prosecutions has clearly identified burglary sentencing and repeat offenders as an issue. This week, during an appeal hearing, the DPP said longer sentences should be imposed on those convicted of burglaries of elderly and isolated people. Some weeks ago, a 20-year-old man got just 2 years after he tied up a couple in their home and threatened them with an imitation gun as he robbed them. The maximum sentence for burglary is 14 years, but rarely is a sentence like that handed down, no matter how aggravated the burglary.
The criminal justice system, I think, needs a radical overhaul, and there absolutely needs to be an integrated approach taken between how criminals get to court and what happens to them afterwards. I think there is a systematic problem there, and it's certainly in the criminal justice system would probably need an overhaul.
Controversy erupts over sentencing on an almost weekly basis, and the severity of cases the DPP appeals varies. In one case, it appealed a 4-year suspended sentence handed down to a serial burglar who had over 100 previous convictions. The court ruled that he shouldn't serve extra jail time because he deserved a last chance.
The Garvey family were attacked and robbed at gunpoint at their home near Palace Green in April 2012. 6 weeks later, their nearby neighbours, Willie Creed and his elderly sisters Chrissy and Nora, all aged in their 70s, were also tied up and punched repeatedly when their remote farmhouse was ransacked. Judge John Hannon said these crimes displayed a particular brutality and menace.
But despite public perception, judges do sometimes hand down tough sentences. In this case, the 3 men convicted received 17, 15 and 14 years.
Pity there wouldn't be more judges like him. The country would be a safer place.
I think that quite frequently there's a confusion in the public mind between a person who has been granted bail and a person who is yet to be sentenced. People can often wonder why a person is still at liberty when they perceive that person as having committed an offence. But in fact, that person has yet to be convicted of any offence. I think that if one was to look at the sentences handed down for aggravated burglary or for serious burglaries, one would see that the sentences are very lengthy, generally in double figures, and wouldn't be what I would regard as being light sentences in any man.
In 2015, the government introduced new legislation which was aimed at clamping down on repeat offenders getting bail. But the Burglary of Dwellings Act is rarely used. Legal experts say it's cumbersome and was a political measure reacting to public criticism.
The issue seems to be still that bail is being granted continuously, and despite the new law that was brought in 2015, we still have a relatively lenient laws here in terms of bail, where we regarded generally as a left wing in terms of giving people a second chance in terms of granting people bail. So even though the new law has come in, it can often take 3 or 4 years before we're actually seeing repeat offenders actually put in jail rather than released.
It's untenable, and it would be unheard of in a Western democracy to indicate that any person who's charged with an offence shouldn't get bail. The starting point has to be that those that are innocent until they're proven guilty should be at liberty until such time as they're proven guilty.
Every day, Gardaí are engaged in operations to try and stamp out burglaries and convict serial offenders. Local and national units combine efforts. In this footage from the Garda Air Support Unit, a getaway car is tracked. Eventually, a stinger is deployed to burst the tyres. The car was stolen after a house burglary. Many of these pursuits happen under Operation Thor, which targets travelling burglary gangs.
3 units, that vehicle is turned left and he is at stop.
The concern for AGSI is that Operation Thor is primarily run from an overtime budget, and any policing initiative that relies on an overtime budget is liable to be susceptible if that money is taken away.
Burglary is a crime often committed by serial offenders. 25% of burglars are responsible for 75% of burglaries, according to Gardaí. Despite task forces, amended legislation and huge public awareness, it's still a growing problem.
Gardaí would say that it's at epidemic levels. Despite a kind of a reduction in figures in the last 3 months of last year, Gardaí say anecdotally, week in, week out, that they're losing the battle against these highly organised gangs that are terrorising the country.
They're not going to take it lightly. People don't like this sort of crime going on in the country, and they're going to use force if they have to.
Officer here, 3 units, 1 body out of the car there in the bushes on your right.
What about if they're caught? If people who commit these crimes are caught?
I don't know what's going to happen in Fran. They're going to get short sentence and they'll be out again. Something has to be done. People in the countryside are frightened at this stage.
1 person from that vehicle now in custody. 1 person from the vehicle now in custody. That's all we saw leave the vehicle, over.